I was asked the other day which EQ I prefer. I prefer the Tube EQ. I find the Bettermaker Mastering EQ very clean, which is good. If you want a very, very clean EQ with not a lot of sound to it, very vanilla, very, you could almost say plug-in sounding EQ, the Bettermaker EQ is really good for that. And it has a place, and it's why I have it in this mastering chain, because it has a very clean sound. So when I need to do surgical EQ, I have a very clean EQ to do that with. The Tube EQ, however, and bear in mind, in these audio examples, I haven't got the tube active. So I'm not driving the tube, I haven't got the iron on. So I haven't got the tube active. So it's a very fair comparison between the two. That's a very clean EQ when the tube isn't active. And the difference, and you'll hear this, the low end is so rich and, for lack of a better word, warm. It's thick and beautiful, that low end. That's one thing you'll hear with the Tube EQ. The highs are a little more dull, but I find it's more a case of the Bettermaker EQ is slightly more harsh and brash with the top end, whereas the Tube EQ is very smooth and lovely. So that's my kind of real conclusion. They both sound great. The Bettermaker EQ, very clean, very surgical, a great EQ. The Tube EQ, however, has a wow to it. It has this brilliance, and you'll hear this. You can clearly hear when we flip from A to B, from the Tube EQ to the Bettermaker EQ, you'll hear just this low end that's powerful in the Tube EQ. Now, when it comes to the comparison between them and why I prefer the Tube EQ, the thing with the Tube EQ is, as an EQ, functionality, it does everything. It's the perfect EQ for functionality. The thing with it is everything you can do is all off the front of it. So you've got the gain, the frequency EQ. You can adjust whether you put the tubes on or off. You've got so much functionality with it. Whereas there is a tiny bit of menu diving, jumping between bands. You only have, 3 controls. So you can basically control the gain, the Q, and the frequency off these 3 controls. And then you can kind of menu dive to go to another band. Whereas the Tube EQ, everything's in front of you. So you can control everything straight off the front of it. You don't have to dive through any menus. That's one major thing why I prefer that. But then bear in mind, the Bettermaker EQ, I think you're talking £2,900, and the Wes Audio EQ, you're talking 5,200, 5,300. So there's quite a big difference. But if your budget stretches to it, the Wes Audio EQ is the one to go for. But even if you want to get a Bettermaker EQ, you're still getting a good EQ. Just bear in mind that it is super clean and it doesn't really have too much of a sound to it. There's no, you wouldn't run something through the Bettermaker EQ and go, wow, that sounds good. It sounds good, but there's no wow to it. Whereas I remember the first time I used the Wes Audio Tube EQ, and I literally was like, wow. I put the tubes on and I drove the tubes, and it was like, yeah, that sounds good. So let's jump in and I'll show you the difference between the Tube EQ and the Bettermaker Mastering EQ.